Well, it was through a friend of mine with whom I met when I was going into a program in the Army Specialized Training Program, who preceded me, and I followed him, called Franklin. We called him Buzz Gould, and Buzz Gould had a classmate in prep school, Ted Fenstermacher. So after I came back from service, and I looked up Buzz again, and I went back to the firm I had come from, White & Case. At that point, Buzz mentioned Ted Fenstermacher, his former classmate in prep school, and that Ted had just accepted an assignment in Nuremberg. And through Ted, I made a trip to Washington, and that's how I got in.
I'll be done.
We went over on the same boat. Yes, well, this was April of 1946.
So you were there. Did you have a chance to view any of the big trial?
Oh, yes.
You did?
Sure.
What was your impressions when you walked into Nuremberg, into the courthouse, and saw all the 21 defendants lined up? What was your reaction?
Well, I was glad to see them there.
Did you get a chance to see Jackson in action?
Yes.
What was your impression?
Very thorough, very eloquent, and very sincere.
Mm-hmm.
His heart was in it. I would run into our judge.
Biddle?
Yeah, Biddle. And he was, saw him and chat with him a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very hard-working man. And of course, he and by all odds, Justice Jackson, they were representative of our best. Ed and I and Henry Miller were all in the military division.
Okay.
And those trials, both of their trials were in the military division because they tried people who were in the military. Milch was number 2 man to Gerd,
Right.
and Ted took on the whole Yugoslavia.
Right,
Yeah, yeah. The activity that I had in the first trial was I shared with Paul Niederman.
Well, you had a chance to interview a few of the more interesting historical figures in von Rundstedt and von Leeb.
That's
what
right.
were your impressions of those two people?
They were very frank and very outgoing. Von Leeb expressed himself on something that was of great interest. He was in. They were all field marshals to these people.
Mm-hmm.
He was in charge of Army Group. I don't know whether it was Middle or South. It was an Army Group North, which was up in Leningrad.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who was in Army Group South, but well, he might have been. But suffice it to say that he was in charge of the Army Group that hit in on Moscow.
Right.
And he made very positive statements that if Hitler had not called them back, they would have taken Moscow. And I can remember myself having read it before I arrived in Nuremberg, that was Hitler had one of those quick judgments.
Right.
Sometimes they were good, sometimes they weren't. And according to Leeb, this was bad because he said we had it. We had it. And of course everyone knows that by the time they came back, they had nothing. They had no chance to hold the second time. They were beaten on all fronts. So that was an interesting story of Leeb, and our principal man. He kept trying to very cleverly to get them involved as part of a team with a double activity of the military, where they would have themselves in charge of the fighting as such, but also that they had a close relationship with the political officer, the party officer, who once some action was taken and prisoners were taken and so forth, they had nothing to say. And he was trying to say, well, isn't it like, I remember a simile that he used, that once the, wasn't the whole thing something like a symphony orchestra, that one depends on the other, that this was a joint, and that was Bob's that was Bob's effort. But of course they said no, it wasn't.
Yeah.
We were completely separate, not functions.
Isn't that something? Now, Rundstedt also indicated something to you regarding the Battle of the Bulge.
Now, when Rundstedt was the most dynamic, he was a very dynamic type of guy. He was known as such, and but even in that, I think we interviewed these people for about 3 days, and he was very positive, very vocative, and he just insisted on saying, no one was, I don't think he was asked the question of this, but he volunteered the fact that he resented anybody calling that the von Rundstedt offensive, because he said I was against it. I knew it was going to fail, and I object to that bearing my name.
I'll be there.
And almost those words.
Did he feel like he was just being a good soldier even though he disagreed with the directive?
No, no. He acted as if he didn't even direct it.
Yeah.
He acted as if he did succeed in washing his hands of it, and someone else took it over. That's the impression I got.
Yeah.
He didn't say that. What he said is just about what I remember. Clark, Denny. I was his deputy. I sensed as we came down toward the end of it that Clark Denny, who I felt would be called upon to make a statement as the director of the division, and his statement would be expected to go into some, at least in broad strokes, the nature of the proof and the nature of the standards and purposes and consequences of the proof.
Sure.
So I sort of drafted something in my own mind, and thinking to give it to Clark and let him work it over and put his input in.
Sure.
But Clark just he hadn't worked on it, and I guess he thought it was whatever it was that he could use it, and I believe he did. And so that went into some content of what Milch was doing, of course, but about what the development of the Nazi movement in connection with what Milch was doing, and the general thrust of the Nazi movement in connection with those people who were in the military,
Sure.
in the military work. And of course, Milch was Goering's second in command, and that was within the military work. And so I remember tracing it and calling it, using such words as a period when the Pax Germanica
Mhm.
settled in on in a cloud of gloom and disaster over the civilian population and all of Germany. And I also, coming to the end, I do remember a phrase such as this. I think it was this, that we, I think pretty much the concluding paragraph that I wrote, that we took it as a truth that man is not the helpless product of his environment, and that civilization is a long history of those who have overcome the handicaps of environment, and in some cases the reverse, and engaged in activities separate and apart from what would have been expected if they were helpless products.
Sure.
And that what we had some high standards here, in that we expected people to overcome environment and fulfill our standards, which demanded that at times one would be called upon to accept and act upon a hard decision in the interest of justice and an active need, rather than to follow the easy and passive decision. And if and the use of that alternative would lead to havoc. And that's where I cut.
That was probably your most profound statement towards how you felt towards the trials?
Public, yes. Because I didn't make many public statements about it.
Privately, what did you think about it? Was it all worthwhile?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Shortly after the trials, the big trial, the international trial, and very, very shortly after, the Army Historical Society moved the documents that had been in Nuremberg to the Pentagon, where they lodged in the sub-basement of the Pentagon.
And was that just bureaucratic efficiency, or was that a
Well,
monkey wrench?
To my mind, the Army Historical Society had a great deal of time to preserve those records for history.
Right.
And it seemed to be at least inconvenient, if not provocative, that they were transferred that way.
And did you know that the Army that the military was no big fan of these prosecutions?
Well, that was my impression.
Okay.
Every man's impression.
Right.
There were a lot of people in the military service.
Right.
And of course, many of them felt that some of our organizations were a little bit bloody in their field conduct too.
Right.
So that could have applied.
Right. So who sends you on the trail of these documents? What's the assignment that sends you to Washington to try and...
Oh, well, we had regular times when we before I went, when we had somebody proceeding, doing the same thing. Before I went over,
Okay, okay.
there were other, for instance, there was Bill Rigney, who didn't stay too long. He was a former U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney in Manhattan. He had some work that he did there, and Paul Needleman took a session there. It was there for quite a while before I went there, and Bill Regan mentioned to Telford Taylor that there's a great deal of information in those files about Field Marshal Kesselring, and maybe someone should go over to look into that. And Telford Taylor deputized me to do that. That was my central target over there.
And did you in fact find useful evidence?
Oh yes, yes.